Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the ITESOFT webinar on getting ready for the duty to report. My name is Nick Dunnett. I'm the Managing Director of ITESOFT here in the UK, and it's a pleasure to welcome you along to join us for this webinar. You are all hopefully on mute in the background, and that should have happened automatically. If you do have any questions or anything that you would like to ask during the event, then please use the chat boxes that are in the right hand corner that you should have on your screen, and we will respond to those as soon as we can during it if possible. Otherwise we'll follow up to you and answer your questions afterwards. Right, let's get going. So firstly, what is the duty to report in payment practices, and what is the point of it? Well, it's really following on from a series of government pieces of legislation, and their intention here is to try and balance out the relationship between big companies and small companies. There has been ongoing a major issue, and particularly with liquidity issues recently, around the perceived imbalance between large organizations who are using small suppliers but then holding off paying them for the services that they provide for a very long period of time. And so the government introduced some legislation in an attempt to move this forward and to really to persuade big organizations that they should be doing better in what they're doing. In terms of what the legislation itself says and what it refers to, in terms of who has to actually create and submit their report, it is all organizations that satisfy two of these three key facts. So either having an annual turnover in excess of £36 million, having over 18 million on the balance sheet, or employing more than 250 people. This affects both standard registered companies as well as LLPs. It also affects individual subsidiaries as well as parent companies, so both would have to submit a report in that situation. It was estimated while they were drawing up the regulations that around about 15,000 companies would be affected by this. In terms of the report itself, the report that you have to submit has three key sections to it. Firstly, there are some statistics where you need to report on the speed with which you pay your suppliers, so the percentage of invoices paid within timeframes of within 30 days, 30 to 60 days, or over 60 days, and also the percentage of invoices that you have failed to pay within the agreed payment terms. There's then some true-false statements around things you can do to help your suppliers. Do you offer e-invoicing? Is supply chain finance available? That kind of thing. And then finally, there's more of a free text narrative section where you can explain what's going on. One of the statements you also have to give is what is your longest payment terms that you have agreed, what are your standard payment terms, and the narrative lets you at least explain, if you do have particularly long payment terms, why you have those. So maybe you have agreements with a company that ships you goods from the other side of the world, and so actually your payment terms reflect that. You receive the invoice when the goods are put on the ship, but you don't pay it until they've arrived in the UK. So you may well have 90, 120, 200-day payment terms to support that process, and this narrative allows you to give that explanation as to what you've done. In terms of the timelines for when you have to do this report, the first report that you will have to do is due just after your half year, and that is the starting point for the clock is the end of your financial year, and it is the end of your financial year after April 6, 2017. 6 months after that, you have to create some half-year reports as standard. 30 days after the end of your half year, you must have submitted this report for the first time. And then again 30 days after your year end, and so on every 6 months going forward to be compliant. If for any reason you choose not to submit, and you should have done, then there are some consequences as part of the Act. It is officially a criminal offence not to submit this, to either submit it invalidly or not to submit it at all. It is punishable by a fine, and each company director or member of the LLP will be will have a criminal conviction held against them as a result of that failure. Also, and I guess less obvious, through not complying is any reputational impact. The results are publicly available, and what you submit is publicly available to anybody that wants to look at it, and obviously failing to submit would be seen both by the press and also potentially by any of your suppliers, and there could be a serious amount of reputational damage for you, and obviously a comparison against your peers would also exist that may mean your suppliers are less generous in what they're prepared to offer you. As I said, the results are publicly available and can be found on the government website. So far, just over 200 companies have submitted their first reports, and here's some of the statistics that are coming back from that. So it's interesting to see around almost, I guess, between a quarter and a third of all invoices are paid late to term. So there are problems that these companies are facing in processing these invoices. Obviously that could indeed be due to problems with the procurement, problems with the suppliers themselves, but a fairly high proportion of invoices are being paid outside of terms. The longest payment terms that anyone has admitted to so far was 240 days, which I guess is fairly serious. There was no supplied narrative to explain it. The longest standard payment terms that anyone's admitted to is 120 days. But as you can see from that, around about half of all invoices are actually being paid within 30 days. And I think the government's aim ultimately here is to drive more and more and more invoices into that pot, and to reduce the number of invoices that are paid later than that. So that's what the legislation talks about. That's what the legislation is telling us needs to be delivered. Those are the reports you're going to have to create to provide that information. What can you do as an organization to ensure that you are prepared for when you have to report, and also going forward to ensure that you can deliver as a business results that can be published and that will make you look in as favorable a light as possible? So firstly, I think the key thing is to understand what your accounts payable process is from start to finish. So how are you actually receiving these invoices? The legislation states that the clock starts from the moment you receive the invoice, whether that's by email or by post or through an electronic exchange. And it doesn't stop until the day that the supplier receives payment. So you need to understand that full process. If you are still paying your suppliers by check rather than by BACS transfer, then you will need to allow in your report for the time it takes for that check to be sent, to be received, and then to be banked by your supplier. So there will obviously be a delay of several days at that point in the process that needs to be accounted for and counted in your results. It's also important, obviously, to understand what happens in between from receipt through to payment within your organization. What have you got to do to approve these invoices to make them ready for payment in the first place? And how are you able to track that and to follow what is happening with each of these invoices to ensure you can see what's happening, where they are at any moment in time, and that you can report on that to understand if you've got problems, where their problems are, and how you can chase down those invoices that are getting close to term and in need of a push to get them over the line. So what can ITESOFT do to help with this process? ITESOFT have a software offer called Streamline for Invoices, which takes your documents as they arrive in the business from any number of different channels using a thing called omnichannel capture. It can take paper that's arrived in the post to scan. It can take emails or electronic invoices. It will capture those invoices and it will extract the data using optical character recognition, and in a perfect world those invoices can be matched to orders if necessary or automatically coded and sent straight through to your finance system ready for payment. If there's problems, then the solution handles discrepancy matching, extraction, and so on and so forth to ensure that everything can be handled with it. It also handles workflow to provide approval for any discrepancies and also for non-purchase order coding and financial authorization to ensure everything is sorted. It handles reporting across the whole piece to ensure you can see where invoices are at any time. And also key to the solution is the ability to detect and prevent any fraud that may be happening within the invoicing process. It is an area where fraud there is a high potential for fraud to occur during the accounts payable process, either through dodgy invoices and so on and so forth. So it's important that that process can be handled from start to finish. In terms of the receipting of invoices, let's look at that a little bit more and see how ITESOFT can help in that first phase. There's a lot of solutions out there in the marketplace today where the performance is not great. The OCR hasn't delivered necessarily as high as it has promised. Master data inaccuracies often mean that it's very difficult to identify which supplier an invoice is from. Duplicate instances of suppliers inside people's supplier database can also happen. And what has been found is that over time solutions degrade in their success. The team using it change, people change, and so on and so forth. And what can happen is that having put in a solution like this, a change of requirement of personnel goes from accounts payable clerks who entered data into an ERP system and managed a process through to pure data correction clerks being required to just key in errors in OCRing or missed pieces of data. A number of companies have also gone down the route of looking at business process outsourcing, and there are other problems that brings in as well. It can delay considerably the length of time it takes for invoices to actually make it onto your ERP system. There's a certain black box approach that happens. Invoices disappear to the BPO and arrive at some point later, making on a duty to report particularly difficult to know exactly where your invoice is at any time. And again, that also reduces skills and moves stuff externally. How does the ITESOFT solution address this and provide support for this? Our latest solution is offering capture in the cloud. So it is taking the OCR process and making it a cloud solution. Obviously supporting that capture in those multiple different formats as standard means you don't mind how your suppliers are supplying invoices to you and allows you to really generate the best possible automation rates and improve your throughput through your system. One of the key things for us is a mutualized supplier master database. Because the process is happening in the cloud, we're able to compare and contrast your supplier database to one that we manage and maintain and keep clean, and are able through robotic learning and through automation processes to link your instance of a supplier and the data you have that's important to you about that supplier to our core understanding of who that supplier is. And we can, as a result of that, have our understanding optimized to the data that's actually published actually published on the invoice itself, to ensure that we can maximize the level of success in the OCR. Similarly, the actual OCR itself, in terms of reading the individual bits of data from the invoice, the ITESOFT engine is a robotic engine and is learning, and the more invoices that it sees, the better it gets at finding all of that data. And the result of that, when we look at our figures, and we measure these every month, but looking back at September, our cloud solution processed in excess of 1 million invoices and achieved automation rate that was in excess of 85%. So we were able to manage, monitor, and actively report back on the successes of that solution. And obviously that is a huge improvement on what can be achieved and has been achieved with historic technology. What does that mean from a business? Well, it means that the throughput that is able to be achieved is very high. We're able to push that up to nearly 60,000 invoices per person, and because it's a cloud OCR process, this can deliver those benefits from day one, meaning you don't need to outsource this to a BPO, to a business processing outsourcing unit, and you can keep the staff in-house to deliver an equivalent level, if not higher level, of benefit that you would have done. Looking at the second part of the process, or from an accounts payable perspective, once we've got the invoice, what happens to it next? Again, looking at some current solutions and some issues that they arise. If you have a full on-premise solution, there are, like any on-premise solution, challenges with costs of that relative to cloud solutions, in the sense that there is an increased amount of professional services. There are benefits of on-premise solutions in terms of having everything exactly how you want it to and having complete control over it. There are obviously times where data protection within an industry or within an area means that on-premise is the only solution, and it's key to what ITESOFT offer, that although I'm talking a lot around our solution up in the cloud, that solution can be handled as a pure cloud solution, as a privately hosted solution, or as an on-premise solution, to offer that flexibility to give everybody the options that they would like best. Those that have moved solutions into the cloud over the past few years have tended to only offer very limited workflow and handling things in a very straightforward and simple way. What we know as ITESOFT, we've been working in invoice processing since the 1980s, and our experience across that is that at a very basic level, the workflow, the approval processes are very similar, but actually when you drill into it with every individual company, their specific requirements, their needs are different, and the workflow that is required for any and every organization needs to be adaptable, flexible, and support that and give that organization both the control that it wants today, but also the freedom and the flexibility to amend that going forward and to give them that control in future. So ITESOFT solution for the workflow uses a industry standard business process methodology and notation to design its solution, which allows us to give greater control to our customers around how they manage their workflow. Using that standardization, it's something that's taught across business degrees and IT degrees now in most universities, which enables people to handle that very quickly, very easily, and manage that process much more effectively themselves, giving them that freedom to make changes as business evolve and make changes business as changes to the business happen, allowing the retention of that knowledge within the business without having to move that knowledge or lose that knowledge as time progresses. The key benefits of all of this are that it allows the organization to minimize delays within the processing of their invoices. All the way through the process, invoices are tracked. It's able to report exactly on where these invoices are. It's able to report on where the bottlenecks in the business are, to enable the business to, and accounts payable particularly, to review areas where processes need to be refined or improved, to look at which departments or sections of the business are causing difficulties. Are the problems related to the way that orders are being raised in the first place, and therefore a very high number of invoices are failing to match? Is it that nobody's goods receipting? So the order is good, the invoice is good, but no one acknowledges the receipt of the goods. Is it just that one particular department are shocking at ever getting around to remembering to approve invoices? They consider it to be a very low value task and can't be bothered to ever do it. So the reporting allows the management of the accounts payable team to really understand where the pitfalls are within their business, and to ensure as part of that process that they're able to push resource, push effort, and push notification through the business to those areas. And obviously what that means is, and with reports like the one you can see on screen here, we can highlight invoices that are getting very close to their payment date and enable you as an organization to manage that, to ensure that you can keep on top of it and to minimize the number of invoices that are being paid late just because the business is sitting on them, when there's no actual true issue with the goods or services that you have been delivered by that supplier. Enabling you as an organization to increase the number of invoices you pay to term, and therefore obviously improve what you're able to state in your reports back to government. And obviously the knock-on benefit of all of that is A, improved supplier relations, your suppliers are happier, but B, because you're able to show that you're paying more and more of your suppliers to term, you can also then use that from a procurement perspective, both to improve the relationship with the suppliers and improve potentially the prices that they're offering you, and it starts to enable you to look into other options like early settlement discounts and other benefits that you can derive, driving business benefit through accounts payable that will benefit not only the financials of the organization but also its reputation and its standing as a company. So thank you for coming today. It's been great to run through this with you all. If you do have any further questions at all, please let us know. Alternatively, if you have any follow-up questions, please contact us on the details that are now on screen. Thank you very much again.